Good morning. It's the appointed time and we have already got a quorum. So thank you for coming to the Home Affairs Panel's meeting today. So information papers issued since the last meeting. Basically, you can take a look at that now. Second item, Hong Kong Football Association Strategic Plan. So let's first invite the administration team to join us. Table before us are the papers submitted by the administration as well as submissions from the deputation. So you may take a look at that. While the officials are coming in, let me briefly introduce the guests, including the Secretary for Home Affairs, Mr. Casper Choi, and Mr. Yong Tek Kang, Commissioner for Sports, and Mr. Paul Cheng, Principal Assistant Secretary for Home Affairs. And from the HKFA, we have the Chairman, Mr. Pui Kon Kei, and Mr. Vincent Yuen, General Secretary. So I'll open the floor to the Bureau Director, Mr. Choi. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the HKFA's strategic plan, the administration is very supportive of the development of local football. And the HKFA is a member of FIFA and also the Asian wing of it, and therefore it's an autonomy body, is responsible for managing its own affairs, and also it's also observing the charter of the Olympics as well as the other bodies, so that it will be run without any interference from outside bodies. And with regard to the management, we have to observe the principle of autonomy, and therefore we have to respect the operation of the HKFA. And also, as far as its work is concerned, we will be providing us venue support, and also we will help it promote the sport of soccer. And also in 2015-16 to 2020, a total of $125 million have been set aside for the strategic plan of the HKFA. That's for the promotion of football in Hong Kong. And also that has been completed in March 2020. And with the work of the HAB and also the FTF, the Football Task Force, we have also looked at the second half of 2020 and also the next 5-year plan. And we recognize the work of the HKFA. In particular, I'd like to mention that in developing grassroots and also youth football, that's very important. In fact, back in 2015-14, well, in fact, that went up by some 30%. So we had a total of some 17,500 people joining that. And the threshold has also been lowered so that even for those below the age of 6, they would also be able to join. And also for women's football and also for futsal, there have also been significant growth. And in fact, in particular for women's and girls football, the participants number has increased from 224,000 to over 5,200. And then for futsal, it's even more the case, because the target was 15,000, and in fact in the past we have increased that number to over 20,000. So we have exceeded the target by some 5 to 6%. And also for secondary school students, we have also supported over 160 support teams. But then, of course, there is still room for improvement. We can also discuss that. Well, for the 5-year plan, the FTF's review has also come to some conclusion, and that has been set out in the paper. In fact, in general, the strategic plan has been supported, and we are willing to provide further support to the HKFA. And in terms of improving the governance and administration, and also the ability of the HKFAs to run its administration, that's very critical at this juncture, and that would also benefit the development of football. And we have already come up with a strategic plan beyond 2020, and there are several objectives. And in 2021 to 2024, we have also set the priorities, and the FTF supports that. For the V2025 plan, there are a number of directions and objectives, in particular for the raising of the standard and also nurturing of talents, and also improving the strength, and also to ensure that there will be football can become a sport for everyone. And for example, for grassroots and also youth football and also women football, and also so there have been significant improvements, and there is also room for improvement of the governance of the HKFA. But then we don't want people to misunderstand and to take it as the full recognition by the administration of the plan. So we just like to acknowledge the substance of the plan. And for 2021's funding application from HKFA, the HKB will scrutinize that very carefully, because we believe that's very beneficial to the development of football in Hong Kong. So with regard to the funding application, we have also given some advice, and that's been supported by the NSAs. And we respect the NSA's advice, and we will be giving time-limited funding. And then in 2020 and 2020 to 2023, some $19 million will be set aside for that. And in 2022, with regard to the V2025, there will be an interim review. With regard to the findings of that review, we will then determine the funding support for it in the next 2 years. And we believe that some 26 funding proposals should be supported. But then, in the light of the audit report number 74, we believe that for the governance of the HKFA, there is a lot of room for improvement, and the management of the HKFA in particular, they should take up the responsibility for the poor governance of the HKFA. That's why we are considering whether or not we should slash the pay for the senior management of the HKFA, and also for the future remuneration review. We advise that they should also improve the governance level, and therefore, for the 26 posts, the funding set aside should be reduced to $15.6 million a year. When compared to 2018-19, it would be a reduction by 15%. The rest of the funding will be for the development of the football training center's operation and development, and we give in principle support for the development plan, so that more funding will be provided to the HKFA, and basically those will be spent on grassroots and youth football and the other areas. With regard to these targets that has been set out in the paper, as to the details and also the performance of the HKFA requiring HAB's funding, we will be setting the target and also performance indicators, so that we'll be able to monitor the performance of the HKFA in implementing that plan, and that will be set out in the table. And if there is any significant discrepancy in the performance, and then we will not hesitate to reduce the funding support, and we might even shorten the funding period in order to show our determination to push for better improvements. And we will also be reporting on the progress of the implementation of these programs. And then with regard to V2025, we will also be conducting an interim review. I'm sure there will be many questions, and I'll be happy to take those questions in order to exchange views with members. I'm sure we are all very concerned about the development of football in Hong Kong. And there have also been problems raised recently, so I'll be setting aside more time for members' questions. So I'll read out the names of members who would like to ask questions. First, Ma Fong Kwok, Xiu Ka Chun, Tanya Chen. So Ma Fong Kwok, 4 minutes, including both questions and answers. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the review report, Well, I've read it. I agree with most of it. I think it has been able to target several issues, but then there are some that I'd like to bring up for discussion. According to my understanding, I think those are the problems faced by the football sector. Recently, because of the pandemic and also because of the social unrest, some sponsors have experienced some difficulties, and therefore in terms of the arrangement and also for the HK Premium League, they have also expressed some difficulties. Well, in the past, there have been a lot of comments, including myself. We have been asking the administration to consider whether they should be given tax exemption so that we can encourage more sponsorship for football matches and so on. So I'd like to know whether or not the administration has the determination and intention to do that. Well, for football, it's a very important sports item, and if it's not self-sufficient and it has to rely on government sponsorship for a long time, then it's not good. Recently, in many districts, there are also football clubs. They have contacted me, and they are experiencing a lot of difficulties. Well, for the district football clubs, if they are not able to do a good job, and if they do not have a stable membership, then they will not be supported. And therefore, in broadening the spectatorship and also increasing the interest of the community and also developing a sense of belonging to that community is not that easy. So I hope that the administration can respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Ma, for your comments. I think whether it's arts or sports, it's not just the participation by the government is important. The business sector also play an important role in the past in promoting our development of arts and sports. I think in Hong Kong we have a very simple tax system. I understand also that many organizations and enterprises are supportive of the development of sports, and in the past there have been many sponsors who would use the marketing expenses, and they can actually enjoy tax deductions through such sponsorships. Also, we have different schemes to promote the NSAs and help them raise the ability to raise funds by matching, schemes and so on, so that we can encourage them to attract more sponsorship. I believe that other than monetary sponsorship, what's more important is that we get support in terms of the venues. So with the support of our bureau, whether it's the Premier League or the First Division teams, we also encouraged, additional funds to support them. When promoting district football, like Mr. Ma said, we need to enhance the capacity building and encourage more people to participate. And we will certainly continue with our effort in this area. So in terms of the development of district football, especially youth training, we have actually provided more resources for that purpose. Mr. Siu Ka-chun, well, I don't know much about football, but I understand that football enthusiasts have told me that they would like to enjoy teams that really play well. Even if their favorite team wins the championship, if they have not play seriously, they would become a laughing stock. But the government, on the other hand, tends to support the Hong Kong FA, which is actually not being very competent. The report in April pointed out about the 14 shortcomings of the FA, and and the response of the FA has not really, responded to those criticisms. But despite that, the government has continued to approve funding for the FA. It has just approved $25 million for it to implement the Vision 2025, and if it's $25 million every year, they will get a total of $125 million. Okay, if I were now, so there's no way I can do anything about the FA, so I can only monitor the government. So 3 questions for the Secretary. In order to encourage the management of the FA, I hope you will enhance the supervision of the FA. When the government used taxpayer monies to support the FA, are there any concrete measures to monitor its performance? Do you have a carrot and stick mechanism? You always talk about value for money. In the welfare sector, you talk about this. Why is it that you're not saying the same thing regarding the FA? And also regarding accountability of the district teams, because there is lack of supervision over a long period of time, the football clubs which receive such supports do not even attend district council meetings. How will the HAB work with the district council to improve the supervision of the operation of these district football teams? Thirdly, football fans have told me that the FA have been managed very poorly for decades. It runs like a family business. The board of the FA, I'd like to ask whether it will become more democratic and also, include representatives from, football enthusiasts, football players, and so on. Mr. Pierce Chan's motion also has also made the same request. Thank you. It's true that in Hong Kong we all care a lot about the development of football. And that is why in the past we have all been very concerned about how we can develop the sport of football and how the FA can lead Hong Kong in the promotion of football. In this plan, if you pay attention to the details, you will find that we have noticed some of the achievements that the FA has made in the past, and especially Hong Kong football going forward will be able to improve its world ranking, and also the proposal to improve training and so on. And I think if you read the paper, you know that we are placing a lot of focus on youth football. I think football enables people to actually participate in the sports. We can also promote it among schools. Of the 33 targets in the 5-year plan, the FA has made some achievements. But of the 23 targets, for those targets which have not been met, I don't think that's a major serious problem, because there are proposals for us to increase the number of coaches, network promotion, and so on and so forth. In my opening remarks, I've already said how I told members how we will further monitor the funding arrangement for the FA, and if they don't perform well, we will cut down on the funding for the FA. So we will be tightening our supervision going forward. I think the Secretary is bypassing all the problems which I have asked. I hope the other colleagues will further follow up on the questions I have raised. I'd like to first of all declare that I'm one of the honorary sponsor of the Yuen Long Football Club. I'm also a football fan. I would also go to watch matches. My son is also a member of the youth football team. So while I don't belong to the football profession, I'm actually a stakeholder. I have found that the government has spent most of the money on the Hong Kong Football Association, but the important thing about football, if we really want to improve, is youth training. So I have to say this again. In the past, the HAB supports some of the district teams. I'm sure Mr. Yuan will say this, but for professional youth training, I don't think there's much which has been done. I understand that according to the new 5-year plan, the government will start a Premier Youth League, and there will be some new, sponsorship for youth training. I'd like to know more about such details. For example, if you're going to set up, Premier Youth League, it's going to cost a lot of money. The Premier League now has 5 youth training teams. And secondly, for the Premier Youth League matches, what is the eligibility? Is it other than the Premier Youth Leagues, can you also organize other matches for non-Premier League clubs? Because there's some non-Premier, youth clubs. They've also performed very well. So other than the Premier League, can we allow other teams to also play? The second question is about supervision, especially when it comes to youth training. If you want to do a good job, you need resources. And if the coaches are not paid well, you cannot expect good results. So for the coaches and the team, the captain of the youth leagues, can you provide them with a decent salary so that they can fully commit themselves to youth training? Regarding the funding support, other than cutting down the support for $15 million for the FA, can you allocate more funding towards coach training and sponsor the overseas training so that they can bring in the advanced expertise from abroad, rather than spending more than $1 million to recruit an expatriate coach who may not necessarily have the required expertise? I think we have had some unsuccessful examples in the past. So I hope the government will really consider, make improvements in these areas. Last year, they had a surplus of $16 million. Could that be also be incorporated into this 5-year plan, mainly to be spent on youth training? I agree with Mr. Look that youth training is the future of football for Hong Kong. In the next few years, we will support the FA in improving, youth training. So the funding that we'll provide will not only allow them to improve their administration, we also have reserved a large amount of money for youth training. Mr. Look talked about the Premier Youth League, and the FA is planning a pilot for this next year. I understand that for the first year they will, allow the Premier League to do it, but in future other eligible teams can also join the Premier Youth League. And secondly, if the criteria of the FA are met in terms of the qualification of coaches and so on, then I think a youth football training institute could be set up. We are now asking the FA to prepare a detailed, proposal for our approval. Fernando Zhang. Thank you. I think the governance of the FA over the years have been, a well-known, fact. We now have the vacancies for 2 senior positions. I think the organization structure of the FA is rather unique. Of course, the post of the CEO is now vacant, and below the CEO there are 6 posts, one of which is the Director of Corporate Governance, and this director apparently had been found to be, incompetent. He has not really done much work. For the other 5, the director of referee, technical director, a chief executive, and a director of the competition department. For any other company or organization, this is a rather strange organizational chart. Many companies will, have such, an organization chart based on functional division of labor, for example, marketing, sales, production department, and so on. Of course, the FA is not a business organization. Now, in respect of these different departments, should the FA be governed like that? I find it rather odd because the functions of the FA in promoting football matches and training, as well as promotion and marketing, these are all very important work. Of course, I'm not saying that coaching and referees are not important. I am in favor of the FA to also include, football fans and other stakeholders onto the board. So I hope that they will really review their corporate structure, and also on the board they will incorporate such representatives. And I hope that in respect of their 5-year plan, the government will lay down detailed KPIs. And if these KPIs are not met, then like the Secretary said, we should reduce its funding. And I think it's like the Education Bureau. I think you can consider injecting new membership into its board in order to improve, its governance, so that we can have improve the development of football. Thank you, Dr. Zhang. I would also like to see the development of football, towards the right direction. Now, our football fans also care a lot about local football. They would like to, in terms of planning, promotion, I think in the past and also going forward, we expect the FA to enhance the communication with the stakeholders. In the last 5-year plan, we encourage them to do more promotion online and conduct more public engagement. In the past, the FA did have communicate with different stakeholders. Of course, more communication can help the FA to obtain more support from the football fans and attract more spectators to go to the football pitches to watch the matches. So I believe these are the things we would like to see going forward. Mr. Bui Kon K, I'm the chairman of the FA.
We have said a lot about this, and a lot of good advice has been given. Well, since last year, after I've taken up the chairmanship of the HKFA, and of course at the PAC, we've been here and together with the PAC members, we have managed to identify many problems with regard to the governance of the HKFA. We agree to some of the criticisms, and we will be working very positively to make improvements. And once again, I'd like to thank the Bureau for its support for football development in Hong Kong. And of course, some might suggest that well, in the past, our governance was less than desirable and our performance has not been very good. So we are aware of these situations, and we are moving in a direction whereby improvements can be made. As shown in the audit report, we will be working on those recommendations in order to make improvements. So we are now undertaking a very detailed review of the HKFA. We understand that under the existing governance structure, several senior management members have already left. So we might be giving people an impression that we are taking the opportunity to undertake a more detailed review as to whether or not the structure has been very duplicated and so on. Yes, we'll be looking into that. as to long-term training, we'll be attaching more importance to youth development and also school or students' development. And many might think that despite government's funding support, some of the spending might not have been deployed to the right place. Yes, many people are concerned about the governance of the FA, but then for the Premium League and also our support for the Premium League teams, it may not have been enough, and therefore we will be strengthening our efforts in those areas so that the resources will be able to go to the right places in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pui. Well, this is your first time to speak. That's why I've given you more time. Yes, Dr. P.S. Chan. Thank you. I've deliberately worn this football uniform in order to show my support for this. Well, I can see that you're going to set up more district-based training centers for football. And in a paper, you suggest that in Hong Kong, Kowloon and New Territories, you're looking into the possibility of setting up district-based FTC, but then you have not been able to reach an agreement with the HKFA on the sustainability of the Cheung Kwan No Training Center. But then according to the Hong Kong standards and guidelines, I've looked at the number of football pitches in the 18 districts. In fact, there is still a shortfall in different districts for the 5-a-side, 7-a-side, and also 11-a-side football pitches. So in many districts, we still have not been able to identify sites for the construction of football pitches. So my question for the HKFA is this. Okay, with regard to the training centers development, what's the operation mode going to be like? So what's your idea? Can you share that with us? Well, we do encourage our Premium League clubs to set up their own teams, and then there should be positive or active training. I think there are some merits to this, because for the nurturing of talents and also footballers training and also support for the team, they'll be able to provide support for their own clubs. In fact, that has been the case in our history. For example, the South China Club and also Yu Yun and
Happy Valley.
or Happy Valley or Happy Valley clubs. So they'd be able to build up their team so that they'd be able to advance the level of players. And of course, we would also have to provide better support in terms of venues, because very often do we have enough football pitches for all the clubs to make use of for youth training and so on. Well, as we have seen during the Sports Institute's age, we have introduced systematic training, and that's been very good. But then when it comes to the clubs themselves, do they have their own venues for training? We will continue to liaise with the LCSD on the distribution of venues. We will also be talking to the NSAs and football clubs to see what can be done about it. The administration is now setting aside some funding for the districts to offer or run youth training. So we will have to communicate further with the individual football clubs on the venue. Well, of course, the idea is a good one, so that the clubs themselves will be able to identify the training centers or to set up their own training centers for the training of their own clubs that will nurture a better sense of or inculcate a better sense of belonging. But then, as you cited the example of the South China Club, well, my understanding is that because of the venue constraint, well, for the South China Club, they do not train the footballers in their own venue, and then for another team, which is rather successful, but then there is still this danger that the site might be used for alternative long-term planning. So how do we help them to identify such sites? What's your take on this? Well, let me briefly talk about this, Chairman. Other than Kichi, well, I understand that some other clubs are also trying to identify sites for their own use. If they have some sites in mind, they can also liaise directly with us. And then we will have to consult the district council and the local representatives, so that will take some time. Well, in Hong Kong, it's almost impossible to identify a site for football pitches construction, right? Yes, identifying sites has been very difficult. But then, in principle, we support the HKFA and also individual football clubs for developing such training centers. Yes, Tanya Chang. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak, because I'm not a member of the HK panel, but then I'm a member of the PAC. I understand that at the last HK panel, the administration is willing to discuss this. That's the reason why I'd like to follow up on this. Well, as I can see, and also the Bureau Director also talk about the training for grassroots and youth footballers. Well, the number has greatly exceeded the target. It's something good, but then I'd still like to comment on their future development, whether it's under the Hong Kong's education system, so that they can become professional footballers. And I'd like to see better articulation. Of course, it cannot be watertight, but then we would still like to do a better job. Well, I might have missed some points with regard to the funding to be provided. As you might recall, at the time we did say that well, under Project Phoenix, to the 5-year plan to this upcoming plan, most of that will be spent on staff remuneration. But then apparently that has not really helped. In particular, the number of staff has exceeded what is needed. And you said that you'll be reducing or downsizing that. So you would try to reduce the number of senior management staff, and I think that's good. And then in terms of the number of posts, should it be 25 or 26? Apparently, the academy head coach has been cut. So what is the latest situation? And also on the performance indicators, you have the performance indicators and also the performance targets. So I'd like to know for football and for grassroots and youth football, I understand that that has been put in recently. So how come, for various reasons, the amount is still like that? And also for the performance indicator, that started off when Project Phoenix was implemented, and also in terms of the spectatorship, I think we did discuss this. But then for the click rate, I'd like to bring this up, because when I try to browse the website, it's very primitive. So it's like a kindergarten website, and it's so boring that it's hard to surf the site. And then when I was trying to search the information, well, sometimes the information doesn't match, and then even if it's just the newsletter, well, it's like the uploading of some PDF files. So if it's so primitive, if it's so unattractive, then how can you increase the click rate? And also, what information will be available so that more people will be attracted to browse it? And there should also be more interactive elements. I understand that it's difficult, but then the fact that you have set up this forum for communication, Mr. Poo, you should understand that initially we were so happy because by 2034 we should be able to play in the World Club. So that's very ambitious. But then how can you ensure that the click rate on the website can increase? It's not an unachievable target, right? So can it be made more simple so that the administration and the FA can also tell us what can be improved? And also on sponsorship, well, given the current economic climate, it's hard to get more sponsorship, but then you will have to do something to ensure that you'll be able to attract more sponsorships, right? HKFA, a very brief response, please. Well, let me try and answer some of that. Yes, Ms. Chen was focusing on the 26 posts. Yes, a total of some posts will be cut. Well, in terms of promotion of football, I think they've achieved some results already, and in terms of sponsorship and also advertising revenue, that has reached some 5 to 10% every year. Yes, Ms. Tanya Chen has made a very good point, and some advice has been very specific, so they'll consider it to see how that can be improved. During the past few years, in terms of the official website, if you look at 2013-14, it's about 400,000, and it went up to 2019 and 20. But then the viewership has increased, but then it's about how they can make further improvements. Well, for Facebook, so that also went up from 9,000 to about 15,000, and then for the fans page, well, that also went up from about 18,000 to 30,000 in 2019 and in 2019. Yes, the number of people viewing or browsing their website has gone up, but then it's about how they can improve the content. So in terms of the technology and also interactiveness, and also in terms of marketing, they would also have to have people with new mindset in order to make improvements. So HKFA might also wish to respond. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Chen. In particular, she referred to sponsorship and also the web management of our website. I think it's been there for over 10 years, and nothing much has been done about it. So the thing is, we do not have a dedicated individual or person to look after that. And then in terms of getting more sponsorship, I think many people, including members, have given us a lot of advice. Apparently, in the past few years, we have not been very successful. That's because of our own measures. They are not very attractive. I think in certain respects, FA attaches more importance to marketing, promotion, and so on. But then our sales team has not been working very hard. Well, to be honest with you, in the past, we do rely on the senior management's social networking in getting sponsorship. And you also talk about tax incentives like tax exemption and so on in order to attract more sponsorships. Yes, we'd like to do that very much. But then at the end of the day, it's about the matches and their attractiveness to the spectators, and therefore we have to offer more support to the youth football development and also the premium leagues development. In particular, for the professional matches, if they are attractive enough, then we are not worried about sponsorship.
Golden Chow, thank you. I would also like to say that for some time, the Audit Commission or the audit report, we found that earlier there were some problems with the governance of the FA. According to the paper today, we see that there are certain areas where there will be review. I would like to focus on the FA's reliance on public funding. I think there is one paragraph in the paper about this. In the past, the government allocated $25 million to the FA. Just now, colleagues commented on the question of sponsorship. I don't know whether you have any plans as to how. I think from relying on commercial sponsorship or support from commercial entities, or using the term sponsorship is right, how can you increase the proportion, that proportion, so that you can rely less on public funding? I think in the past, when you use, government funding, there have been a lack of proper supervision, and you have been criticized for not being very efficient and not delivering value for money when you spend public funding. But if you can get more commercial sponsorship, if the sponsors are willing to give you the resources, of course they would have some expectations of you, and that would actually be the incentive to make you to help you make improvements. So I would like to hear from the Bureau or the FA as to how the Football Association have any plans or initiatives to reduce the FA's reliance on public funding, and also trying to get more commercial sponsorship so that they can do a better job. Bureau. Thank you, Mr. Chow. As I said, there are many football fans in Hong Kong who care a lot about the development of local football. In the past and also going forward, how we would enhance communication with the stakeholders and how we can promote the development of football, including, for example, attracting more people to the pitches. As I said, in terms of promotion, I think for a spectator, the actual experience of a match, in the field is very important. How we're going to improve the standard of football. Of course, the football fans care a lot about that. If the standard of football is to be improved, I think we should begin with youth training. When more young people can participate in football, and our funding for the district football teams was aimed at, expanding the number of football fans at the district level. And also going forward, the FA will need to, further promote the participation of football at the district level and enjoy that football fans kind of a good experience watching the matches, and how we can increase the sense of belonging. I think these are the areas where they've done some work, and in their recommendations for us, they've already considered that. Going forward, we will be conducting interim reviews, and we will work with the football, professions as to how we can together, continue to improve the standard of football. Mr. Leung Chee Cheung is not in the room, so I think we can allow for a second round, but we also need to, deal with the three motions. But since we don't have a quorum now, perhaps we can vote on the motions towards the end of the meeting. Let's deal with the motions first. Okay, if I may ask my round of questions first, and if we have a quorum, then I don't think we need to call a division for us to vote on these three motions. Now, my question for the FA is that we all support football in Hong Kong. Regarding the issues relating to the FA, the Football Task Force has done a review. Mr. Pui is a capable chairman, but relying on him alone will not help resolve all the problems of the FA. We will need the joint effort by all the directors of the FA. In the report mentioned many problems regarding the governance of the FA, including audit, internal audit, maintenance of records, and so on. But I don't think we've touched on the core issue here, which is the governance of the management of the FA. So I'd like to ask the chairman or the executive director. You said that some senior management have left, and this is the opportunity for you to reform the management structure of the FA. I'd like to hear from you, what are your thoughts on this? You need to improve the governance improve the management of the FA before you can do a better job. So I'd like to hear if there's any response from the FA. Well, he says that there is a conflict of interest on his part. Well, I agree that indeed we are now focusing on corporate reform, we will have to wait until the 5-year strategic plan is approved, and the funding arrangement. And indeed, we need to review whether or not we have any duplication within the corporate structure. We need to have better communication to improve, corporate governance. If we don't have good coordination among different departments, that really is the root cause of the problem. There could be, lack of good communication. I think in the past, the FA has many committees. Some of it, their confusion over the conveners of these committees and so on, and hence the criticism that there is a lack of supervision. So we need to do better going forward. I agree that I agree when you say that you need to enhance supervision, but you don't even convene meetings. There is no chance for communication. The attendance rate of many of the directors are very low. Well, I think the attendance rate among directors are okay, especially the new board. We have held many special meetings, and basically we have had very good attendance. And we have been very serious in our deliberations at these meetings. The last meeting, we start at 3 p.m. and the meeting ended at 9 something. So we have been very serious, and our colleagues have been having us draft reports. Of course, we also need to review the work of all our various committees. For some of the committees, they might have not met frequently enough, and these are the shortcomings highlighted in the audit report, and we certainly review that, and we are planning to engage a consultant to help us work out a plan. Of course, the board itself will continue to review the situation. Hopefully we'll be able to, deliver some results. So for the new board, we will continue to enhance the supervision of the FA. We will also need to fill some of the vacancies as well. It would be, of course, desirable if we could recruit the required talent. Of course, while the directors are volunteers, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't dedicate ourselves to work. I, being the chairman, have actually spent a lot of time in the work of the FA. The CEO has now left, and many staff have actually come to me when they have any problems. So I've actually appealed to our fellow directors to act more, to participate in the work of the FA more actively. Okay, I think at this point, I will ring the division bell, and once we have a quorum, we can take a vote. We have 3 motions from Mr. Shu Ka-chun, Mr. Pierre Chen, and Mr. Luk Chun Hong. We're short of 3 members, or 4, before we can form a quorum. So we're short of 4 members.
夠人就停鐘。
We can stop the bell once we have a quorum.
仲爭2個。
We need 2 more members to form the quorum.
夠啊。好啊，夠人啦。咁不如我請
Okay, we now have a quorum. I'll now ask Mr. Siu Ka-chun to read out his motion. Thank you. This panel requests the Home Affairs Bureau, when approving the funding for the 5-year strategic plan of the Hong Kong Football Association, introduce a incentive and penalty sanction in order to encourage the Hong Kong FA to actively, achieve its targets and to ensure the public funds are spent effectively. Right, those against? For no objection, any abstention? None. So the motion is approved. We now come to the motion moved by Mr. Pierre Chan. I move that this panel urges the Hong Kong Football Association and the Home Affairs Bureau to accept the views from the public. That is, for the next year, it should improve the board. It should try to reform the board of the FA so that its board would incorporate football players, coaches, and team leaders, as well as football fans, in order to respond to the stakeholders' requests for the improvement to the governance of the FA. So we have all in favor and no objection, so the motion is carried. We now come to the last motion moved by Mr. Luk Chun Hong. My motion is that youth training is crucial to the development of football in Hong Kong. The panel urges the Home Affairs Bureau to provide further support for youth training. Other than elite training, we should also support women football, grassroots football, and ensure that youth training receive sufficient resources and that coaches and staff will get reasonable remuneration in order to actually improve the standard of football. Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. So the motion is also carried.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Bureau Director. So please think hard about this HKFA and make improvements. Next, a review of the Sports Subvention Scheme and the governance of our National Sports Association. So it's also about sports development. So other than the Bureau Director, we will also have new members from the LCSD joining us. So our welcome to the Bureau Director and also two representatives from the LCSD, including Ms. Ida Lee and also Mr. Benjamin Hong. So without further ado, I'll defer to the Bureau Director, who will walk us through the government's paper. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the SSS, the Sports Subvention Scheme, and also support to enhance the governance of NSAs, we have always supported that, and we have been promoting sports development and popularization and also elite sports. In terms of promoting sports development, since 2017, we have already set aside some $60 billion of new resources, including some 31.9 for the development of the sports park, and also in the 18 districts we are also enhancing recreational and sports facilities, and also in terms of support for community and elite sports, some $8 billion have been set aside. And then we have also introduced a number of items for the support of major events or mega events of sports and so on. And then for the NSAs, that's always been our main collaboration partner in promoting sports, and through the LCSD, which is responsible for managing the scheme, we would offer subvention to NSAs so that they would also be encouraged to develop sports at the district level. And we have some $300 million for that purpose in 2019. And the LCSD would be looking at the SSS, and a comprehensive review was conducted, and we are going to do that in two phases. Phase 1 would aim at identifying the areas of concern of NSAs, including the coaches and so on. So as a result of that, we would be allocating some $57 million additional support to them in order to resolve some of their pressing operational needs, and also in participating in overseas matches and so on, and also to support the underprivileged athletes, and also improving their office accommodation and so on. So that would be used for that purpose. And then phase 2 would look at both local and overseas practices in sports subvention, so that would be able to make improvement suggestions for the SSS. That would cover, for example, in applying for government support, what's the eligibility criteria, and also how it should be allocated, and also how we can attract and retain talents, and also for the NSA's corporate governance and monitoring system. The phase 2 review was already completed by the end of 2019. And the LCSD has also made a number of suggestions for improvements, including additional support for NSA's staffing establishment, and then the amount of support that they can get, and also the support for new sports items development, and also enhanced staff training, and also the enhancement in corporate governance and monitoring system. And the administration will substantially increase our support for the OS and LC, and then in we would also be increasing that amount to about $500 million in 2020, and the number of people that will be supported, and also the number of events will increase to about 4,000, and also for exchange matches and so on. For example, for schools and also district-based events, the number of beneficiaries will also increase to some 200,000. And then for the enhancement of corporate governance and also the monitoring system, starting from this year, we'll be reviewing the situation, and then we would also be looking at internal controls, and we will be flexible in introducing different measures. They will also have to follow certain rules and regulations. And then for the SFNOC, it will be playing a very important and leading role. And at present, there are some 79 NSAs and sports associations. They have their own membership, and it's appropriate for the SFNOC to be tasked with formulating the code of governance, and a steering committee will be set up, which will be responsible for monitoring the review. And a task force will also be set up to look at the work. So we'll be monitoring closely on the progress, and we'll also be reporting to this panel on a timely manner. So we welcome members' questions on the recommendations and also the different initiatives. We'll be more than happy to listen to your views. Thank you. Okay, members' questions. Ma Fong Kwok, Luk Chung Hong, Ray Chan. And if you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hands. 4 minutes, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to welcome the administration's agreement to conducting this review after years of bringing it up with the administration. You're going to review the governance problems of NSAs. My view is that sports development is very simple and straightforward. The more resources that you put in, the result will correspondingly improve. In other words, I think you can look at past performance results. So after the fund was set up, with new facilities and new complex being built, professional and athletes and elite athletes have been able to achieve good results in international events. I'm glad that the administration has agreed that from 2019-20 to 2023-24, the total funding will increase from $300 to $500 million. Would that increase? If it's deployed properly, we should be able to support some spots so that they can have further improvement. In particular, for governance of these NSAs, I think it will help to achieve positive and active results. Because if the efforts cannot be sustained, how can you expect them to take up a greater role in developing sports? So I have several questions. First, I'd like to find out more. That is for the SFNOC and also the NSAs. How much are they going to get from the government's funding? And recommendation 3 says that they should also have pilot schemes transcending different years. So I'd like to know more about those pilot schemes. So what are the vetting criteria? And also which NSAs have responded positively to this? And also what's the funding cycle? 1 year, 2 years, or how long? So can you first respond to these questions? Yes, Commissioner. Well, for the SFNOC's funding every year, the HAB is giving it about $20 million, and starting from 2021, we're going to increase that to about $34 million. That's to tie in with their staff increase and also some developments, for example, for the drug checking. So we'd like to increase manpower for that, and they are also moving towards becoming an independent body. We do support these initiatives. With regard to the biennial funding support, I'll defer to my colleague. Yes, for the pilot scheme, to give them more than 1 year's funding support, well, we have some 60 NSAs, and then for those with that scale, the situation differs, and we'll be looking at the larger NSAs. So those would be for the multi-year funding cycle. So only for those bigger ones, they will be eligible for this multi-year funding, because we hope that they can have longer-term planning instead of just doing this on an annual basis. So they can think a few more steps ahead, and then they will be required to come up with proposals for the next few years, and then they can negotiate with us, and we will try this out under this pilot scheme. We hope that gradually individual NSAs will become more visionary. They will be looking further ahead in developing their own sports so that they can develop accordingly. I just have a very simple follow-up. For this multi-year grant, can it be flexible so that it's not just confined to 1 or 2 years, it can be 3-4 years, right? Yes, this is something new. And therefore, at present, under the SSS, we do have this annual submission of applications, but then looking at overseas experience for many sports items. For example, in participating in major sports events, you might be talking about a few years down the road. And therefore, from overseas experience, the funding would be for 2 to 4 years. And then in Hong Kong, it's the first time that we're going to introduce this. That's why we will be looking at it as a pilot scheme. So we will start from 2 years or 3 years, and then for the detailed implementation plan, we will negotiate with the individual NSAs to look at their situation to see what kind of funding cycle would suit them best. So generally speaking, we are talking about 2 to 4 years. Okay. Next, Luk Chung Hong. Thank you, Chairman. I noticed that for NSA's support, you're talking about several million to $10-20 million, for example, for the Badminton Association and so on. So, of course, they have made achievements, and that's indisputable. But then my question is, well, just now we talk about football. We agree that youth training is very important. So, is there any dedicated or specified ratio for youth training? Because I understand that for some prospective elite athletes, they've been working very hard. But then if you train for something, once you like to become an elite, it will be very costly. For example, venues and everything. It will be very costly, and therefore for the grassroots and also for the underprivileged families, that will be very hard. So how much of those funding will go into this? Has the administration got the figures? Yes, Bureau Director, thank you for your question. Well, I don't have the information with me, but then on the overall planning, we do hope that we would be able to do that, and then we'll be increasing the resources for that. As you might have noticed, well, other than increasing the costs for talents, we will also be increasing the resources for youth training, because if they have more opportunities to go to overseas for matches, that would also help their development. Well, for individual NSAs, because of the different structures and promotion model, it's hard to come up with an across-the-board approach. But then for individual NSAs, as we can see in terms of local promotion, training of talents and so on, they have different models. And as we have said, we'll be strengthening youth training, like what we have done for football, because we hope that in different areas at different levels, if there can be better performance, and if they can start at a young age, and if they can be given proper training from the start, that would help develop the younger generation into elite athletes. It's not just about youth development. As you can see from the paper, there are other areas. For example, coaches' development would also be important, because only when we have good coaches can we have good athletes. And also for athletes' development, the strategic plan would also involve strengthening support for different areas, so that there is a very good promotion pathway for them. So we have stepped up the remuneration for those working for NSAs. It's not just for athletes. Whoever is interested in developing in sports will be able to have a chance to have a clear career path.
Chairman, I would also like to suggest that other than the government giving more funding to the NSAs, I think in December last year I did submit a motion regarding my proposal to increase tax exemption for organization for people who that is tax exemption. For example, you now allow tax exemption for those who are involved in technological innovation. So I'd like to ask whether or not there is any progress to follow up on my earlier suggestion. I think earlier I did already mention that we have a simple tax system in Hong Kong, so we can actually do what Mr. Look suggested in different ways. At the moment, there are many commercial organizations to support the development of sports and the major sports events. If they do that, they already enjoy some tax concessions. Mr. Ray Chan, thank you. We're now discussing the sports subvention scheme. This is a subsidy scheme for the NSAs, and such subsidies will go to the NSAs. And if the NSAs or the sports organizations would like to organize large-scale or mega sports events. Now, if the events were not organized by the NSAs or such organizations, then it will not come under the funding scheme, right? So the subsidy scheme will only support the organizations concerned. For example, in 2022, Hong Kong has successfully won the bid to stage the gay sports. We've actually defeated many cities in North America. This is a major international sports event. but it would not come under the sports subvention scheme, and the organizers may have to apply to the mega sports, funding scheme. Now, in future, I said that you will work with the relevant NSAs to. We have to work with the NSAs to apply for funding support. Right now, the organization have to rely on their own resources to do this. And this highlights one problem. That is, if it were not for the traditional NSA, if it is young or new and emerging sports organization which have not staged any events or activities over the past 3 years, so the present, subsidy scheme will not cover those organizations. So in your future sports subvention scheme, could you be more flexible, or is it that it will only, benefit the NSAs? Well, would there be other subvention schemes that can help organizers of those events which are suggested, like the gay, event I mentioned? Thank you. Regarding sports promotion, of course, they're done through the relevant NSAs. As for the new and emerging sports, the organizers can come up with some new initiatives to promote that sports. Regarding Mr. Chen's suggestion, he already pointed out that they may not be directly related to sports. So from the tourism angle or other perspectives, it would depend. Well, the government may have different funds with their respective policy intentions to use the fund to achieve particular purposes. For sports, we do have our criteria, and if the proposed event I don't not have the details regarding the event that you mentioned, but to put it simply, for every fund set up by the government, they have their own requirements and procedures. If you can meet those criteria, of course, you will qualify. Otherwise, I think we have to look at what exactly the organizers of that particular event would like to promote. So this is something that the Bureau may need to look further into. Without the details, I cannot really respond to the example Mr. Chen suggested. I'm just citing one example. Don't say that they are not related to sports. It's not a purely sports event, but most of the programs are actually sports competition events. For this new type of sports events, is it that you have to come up with a project, and if various NSA can work together, they can directly apply for government funding, or must they always go through the NSA? For sports events, you have to go through the NSAs. Tanya Chen. I think the PAC also had follow up on this particular issue regarding the sports subvention scheme. I think 10 years ago, or even longer than that, the Audit Commission also published a report on the subject. So I think this is something that deserves our support. Some members said that to achieve results, you need to commit the resources. I think committing resources on sports does produce results. If you look at during the budget speech, Dr. Pierre Chen asked a question saying that is, for some of the NSAs, they may have performed very well, and the funding they get from government will increase, as a result. So among the NSAs and among different sports, there is competition. So other than the athletes, striving for better results, I think this is also very interesting. But as for football, among all the NSAs, they get the most funding. From 2018-2019, they received almost $20 million under the subvention scheme. Ranking second is badminton. They got $17 million. So we can see that football receive a lot of funding from the government, probably because it involves a lot of people. But still, I'm worried about the corporate governance of the FA. If you commit more resources to the FA, they have more than 20 management positions, and now we have seen. I think item D is about corporate governance and monitoring. I understand that they have, lay members, they have a task force, and so on and so forth. But honestly, the NSAs are required to comply with the code of best practice of the ICAC, but there's no standard approach. So I don't understand why a small group of people can receive several $1 million. Several people are just involved, and it can ask all the several dozen NSAs to improve on the corporate governance. Even if you ask the SFOC to do this, it may not be right. If you have a dedicated team to follow up on this, this may not be feasible. So in the long term, how can you, be accountable to you and show whether or not they've actually, achieved improved the corporate governance? So for the FA, you say that there's a chance that you may cut down its funding if you don't perform well. But are there any KPIs for that task force so that you can really monitor the performance of these NSAs on a long-term basis? Thank you. I think in paragraph 33, 34, we've already touched on this already. For the LCSD, we have, lay down some code of practice for the 60-odd NSAs. They have to comply with those. For government sponsorship in the past, to ensure resources are spent properly, the Audit Commission, we have encouraged the NSAs to comply with the ICAC's code of best practice and also, code of ethics for directors and so on. Transparency is also very important. Regarding, transparency, in March 2017, the SFOC was incorporatized, and that has actually helped enhance the transparency. The HAP has also endeavored to enhance the corporate governance of NSAs. Beginning from 2020-2021, we will set aside a time-limited, funding to set up a task force to review the operations and internal compliance of the various NSAs. In paragraph 34, we have laid down requirements for the NSAs. In respect of the progress achieved, we will follow up on the effort. So transparency is very important. We would check whether or not they've complied with the mechanism, and if not, then there will be consequences and so on. So these are the things that we will be, paying attention to going forward.
都有嘅。
好啊，咁我都
因為馬逢國議員都舉咗第二輪都係。
Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. All right, if I may ask my question first. Regarding the sports subvention scheme and the corporate governance of the NSAs, I'm also very concerned about this. In the past, I've actually reflected to the sports commissioner regarding the governance of some NSAs, and I'm grateful to the help that the commissioner has given me. Of course, the government should not be intervene excessively, but I think we have to also ensure that there is good governance. The athletes that they elect does not just represent the NSA, but also Hong Kong to take part in international events. So, like the incident involving the Karate-do NSA, when there is a controversy involving an NSA, to what extent would the government step in, and what are the channels? That is, for the aggrieved parties to actually seek help from the government bypassing the NSA. Regarding the eligibility of athletes to participate in international events, there are some established procedures. I've said that in the operation of the NSA, I don't think we should intervene with the operations of the NSAs. There have been examples in the past when government interference would actually affect the eligibility of NSAs to participate in such events. In the past, according to some examples in the past, in terms of communication, transparency, and how we can do better in order to minimize unnecessary misunderstanding or speculation, I think that's important. How can we follow up on that? At the PAC report, the Audit Commission already mentioned that there are mechanisms for complaints. Perhaps I'll stop here and see whether the Commission has anything further to add. I think our task mainly is to monitor how public funds are being used. Let's say if we give a certain amount of subvention to a particular NSA, to participate in the subvention scheme, they need to sign an agreement and undertake to comply with all the rules, including, for example, how they spend the funding after they've received, what is the procurement policy and the selection criteria. So there are rules in place governing that. And when they spend the money, and should there be any complaints, then of course the NSA itself should deal with the complaints first. Sometimes the complaint will come to the HAB or the LCST. When public funds are involved, we will also follow up and investigate. There have been cases in the past which, after the investigation, of course in most of the cases they are not substantiated. There have been, however, some substantiated cases where the faults lie with NSA, and we would appeal to the NSAs to rectify. And in some other cases, the NSAs have to comply with the IOC charter. For example, there are complaints which doesn't involve public funds, but the NSA has violated the IOC's charter. Then the SFOC has the power to actually sanction that particular NSA and follow up.
合法
Well, it's about lawful use of the funds. It's not about reasonableness, because even if it's not reasonable, so long as it's lawful, is no problem. So I hope that there can be a better appeal mechanism, so that the administration will also be able to play a role under such a mechanism. That would help for those aggrieved parties and improve the appeal mechanism's credibility. Because, after they have lodged a complaint, if it's the same group of people dealing with their complaints, that's not a very good way to deal with controversies. The reason why the administration will have to come in, that's because the administration is the one giving them the funding, and therefore it will be more influential, and it's also more credible because it's an independent third party. So I hope that the department will pay more attention to this, so that the appeal mechanism will enjoy the credibility and impartiality in dealing with complaints. So I'll be giving the floor to members. Yes, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, 4 minutes. Yes. Thank you, Chairman. My question, in the second proposal by the administration, they said that there would be some pilot scheme to support some new initiatives. I think they have taken on board some of my suggestions, and therefore I think is good. But then for emerging sports, there are many. So if the administration were to support these, what kind of attitude would the administration adopt? So will there be a cap on the number of new and trendy sports? And if there is no limit, what are the criteria for selecting these new and trendy sports? So why would you think that they should be supported? And in order to get government funding, what kind of conditions do they have to meet? And they might also be competing for venues and so on, and they would be disadvantaged because they are new and they are a new sport. So what kind of further support would you be giving them? Bureau Director, well, there are some sports items. They would have gone through this stage when they were new and not established. So when it comes to new sports, when compared to conventional sports, they would be somewhat different. Basically, they are very new. So we are of the view that in the past, there might have been more mature sports where NSAs would be getting funding support. But then for new sports, for example, for some Thai fighting and so on, they are relatively new, and we'll be looking at new sports and the relevant NSAs, and if they are interested, then they can also apply. So I'll see if the Commissioner has anything to add. Yes, on venues, the LCSD has a policy so that for specific venues, new sports can apply for the use of those. So we will give them special consideration. Generally speaking, we'll be talking about the underutilized venues. So they will be given special consideration in using those venues. What about the selection criteria? Are there any specific criteria? For example, how many people have to support it, and to what extent do they have to develop themselves into? And also, what are the governance criteria and so on? Well, Chairman, in this regard, the LCSD will conduct a review, and a detailed guideline will be prepared. So once the guidelines are ready, they will be published. Thank you. Okay, next, Tanya Chen. Thank you, Chairman. You refer to the complaint mechanism. We've followed up on some cases, and at the PAC, we also asked about that. But then for the complaint mechanism, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Research and Library Services Division, because in preparing for the PAC hearings, I noticed that several years ago, the RNLSD did a very detailed study, and the recommendations contained therein would also be very similar to those raised in the audit report. And if you're interested, you may wish to take a look at that study. In fact, it's very meaningful. And these problems did not just emerge recently. A few years back, upon the request of some members, the Research and Library Services Division conducted this research and came up with this report. And I think I'll be asking on para 33, 34. Well, 33, 34 include all the NSAs. It's hard to expect them to improve all in one go. But then a task force has been set up. But then for follow-up action, we will have to go to the S7OC. But then for the S7OC, first of all, I'd like to know more about this. You will have to set a good example. And just now, as you said, they will have to form themselves into a company so that there would be higher transparency. And how long would it take following that report? And also, when will they come back to this panel for progress report? And also, at the same time, will it be looking at the other NSAs, and will they be tidying up their work at the same time? So will there be any further follow-up action? And will that also involve future funding? Well, to be honest, from what I can see, that would not have anything to do with the funding. So even if you identify any problems, well, if they are related to funding and staff training, it's not just about standalone seminars and so on. And of course, for funding, it has nothing to do with me. It's about the future. But then in para 35, how are you able to follow up on their improvement measures? And then 34 is that you will also have to rely on the SFOC to follow up on this whole thing. And then the task force will be reviewing the practical work as to how some of these can be implemented. So I'd like to know about the work process or the time flow. Yes, I can supplement on this. It's not just that we'll be giving them the funding to set up a task force, as Ms. Tanya Chen just said. They will have to set up a dedicated team, and it should be independent. So that would be somewhat different from their previous work. And after they have submitted some initial work plan, every year they will be giving us a progress report on the review. And there would also be briefing sessions to tell us exactly what they will be looking at. And also the NSA's internal control mechanisms, and also comprehensive review of some documents. And arrangements will also be made to meet with some NSAs and their persons in charge to look at their actual operation and the problems that they have encountered. These are also important. And then there will be some review findings. So they've given us some direction. I think what's important is in para 34, under items B and C, by the time when they have some recommendations for improvement, the administration will be looking at whether we'd like to ask for some changes. And once they have included that in the report, it means that if there are areas that should be improved, and if they fail to follow through, if there is serious discrepancy in what they pledge to do and what they actually do, then we might not be giving them the funding because they have failed to achieve those objectives or target. So it's about how we can identify the problem, and then we can come up with substantial or specific recommendations. So these are the details that we can share with you later. But then I'm sure on different occasions and in this council, members will be following up on this, and we are very transparent. We'll be more than happy to take it up with you. But let me stress that if you were to use the funding under the SSS to improve their governance, I hope that appropriate funding can be incorporated to look at the training and the governance, so that these NSAs will deploy their resources more reasonably. Yes, they should also be spending more on promoting the sports itself. Okay, any further questions from members? If not, we can end our meeting earlier. Next item, AOB. If there aren't any, then meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.